Hello, friends, family, others watching this video. Just want to take a few moments and talk about something that happened to me tonight, and it's pretty relevant for the things that are happening in the world. It's been incredibly relevant for me and emotional for a few reasons. So I just want to talk just for a sec and think out loud. I'm sitting in my condo by myself and there's no one else to talk to, so here you are. Enter you. So for the first time in my life tonight, I called 911. And I know that for many of you, that's normal. That's not something you are afraid of or feel emotional about, but you also, for many of you, like me, you haven't had to. You've lived in a safe environment your whole life. You've always felt protected, or at least you've lived with the illusion of safety. And I know that that's been true for me. And tonight I was just normal day, right? I was watching TV, dinking around on my phone, and all of a sudden, I heard fighting going on through. I'm sitting right next to the window or the sliding glass door, and I heard fighting and screaming and yelling. And in the moments it took for me to get up and go to look through the blinds, I heard a gunshot and screaming, more screaming. And so I retreated and turned off all the lights. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do. That's what I did. Ran to a different window where I was a little bit more sure I might not be seen. And I peeked through the blinds, and I saw about 12 to 15 people out there fighting, pulling certain individuals off of each other, getting into cars. Some of them were racing away. I'm assuming it was a gunshot. I could be wrong. I think that there was a fight ensuing and somebody fired something into the air. That's what it sounded like to me. And so I looked to kind of assess and see if what I had heard was at all true. And from what I could tell, it seemed like that might be, just because of the reactions of the people out there. So I called 911 for the first time ever. And, you see a lot in movies and you hear a lot in stories about what it's like when you feel in danger. When I looked out my window, most of what was happening was about 10 feet from me. It was in my radius. It was in some ways in my personal space. There was there's glass separating me from it. And that's all I could think about those seconds when I was dialing 911, and I expected that the phone would ring and somebody would immediately answer, and say, 911, what's your emergency? That's what we hear, right? But that's not what happened. I waited and I waited, and I felt more and more scared until finally someone answered. And it took 58 seconds. 58 seconds for someone to answer the phone. It's pretty nerve-wracking when you feel like, hey, I need immediate help, and this is a moment where seconds matter. And I had to wait 58 seconds for someone to answer the phone. And they immediately asked for my address, asked me, asked me what was going on, asked me for my phone number, some other information, and they said they would send somebody out. Meanwhile, I'm peeking outside on occasion there's a part of me that wants to, or had wished maybe I'd been recording, or that I, was taking pictures or something. But in that moment, all I could think about was that I need to stay safe. And I don't know the people out there. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to see me peeking through the blinds. I didn't want them to know where I live. And so I looked a little bit, but not much, as I waited for the police officers to arrive. And it took about 20 minutes. So they showed up about 20 minutes later. Actually, it was exactly 20 minutes. Trust me, I was paying attention. And there's 3 sheriffs. They pulled in, got out of their cars. But by then, everyone was gone. Everyone in those cars had pieced out, and I did my best to look and see what's going on with these cars. What makes and model are they? Makes and models are they? What are their descriptions? Is there anything notable? It was a little bit. It was getting dark, so there just wasn't that much I could see. So when the cops got here, I debated: do I go out there? Do I go out and talk to them or not? I wasn't sure if they were going to come to my door and knock, because I did give them my address and my unit number, but they didn't come. And I sat here for a while contemplating, should I go out there? And I always imagined that if I had to call 911, that wouldn't happen. My response would be to cops show up, I run out there, brave, tell them my story, tell them what happened, right? But all I could think about in that moment was my 5-year-old son, and that he has one dad. And if I go out there and somebody sees me and figures out that I made that phone call, and they're not happy about that, right? It just wasn't worth the risk, And I did finally, ironically, after waiting a while, I finally decided, all right, they've been out there for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm just going to go out there, casually say hello, and invite them to come inside. And I don't know why, but from the time it took me to look out the window to see if they were still there, then to walk to my door like 11 steps away, to go down the sidewalk, and to get to the parking lot, took me all of about 15 to 20 seconds, and they were gone. So in that short amount of time, that was it. I don't know why. I don't know if it was a God thing, and that just was the perfect timing, and my instincts were right to not go out there. I only had so much information, and none of that information really was concrete to lead to somebody's arrest, and I knew that. I didn't have information. I didn't have pictures. I didn't have video. I had general descriptions, right? And none of that was really going to do anyone any good. But what was scary to me was just the realization that, hey, I really don't feel safe in this moment. And for the longest time, I believed this story or this fantasy that if I was in immediate danger, I would call 911. They would answer, respond, and in moments or minutes, someone would be there, right? And I've definitely lived with this belief when I see something in movies where, it's a thriller or whatever, somebody's being kidnapped, whatever is going on, and they call the police, and 15 minutes goes by, and you're sitting there in the audience thinking, are you kidding me? Like, how are they not there, right? And maybe if I had said something like, hey, somebody's waving a gun around, that might have been different, right? Maybe they would have been here more quickly. But all I had to share with them was that here's what I heard, and here's what it might have meant. Um, and so the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because in our country right now, there's a lot going on. And there's all this conversation, dialogue, debate, spitting back and forth between, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. And everybody means something different when they say those words. And I'll tell you, I'm a supporter of Black Lives Matter. I have friends who have told me some stories that if I was in their shoes, man, I would be scared all the time. And I think I get that even more tonight. Having felt that, even for a moment, and asking that question, is this a safe place, right, for me and for my son? Like, is this a good place for us? And I stopped and I asked myself, like, I have the privilege to ask that question because I can make a decision tomorrow to break my lease, to move out, find another place, right, and move to a different area. And it would hurt financially for sure, but in a year, 6 months, right, I'd be okay, right? And I wouldn't go without food. I wouldn't go out without necessities, right? And I have a community of friends and family that I know would hold me. And I think the thing that was so powerful to me tonight was just that, I'm grateful that I have that, but so many don't. So many look to their parents and their brothers and sisters and their friends, and they're in the same situation. They can't help them out. They can't get them out. They can say, I love you. They can say, I get it. It's hard. I hope it's different someday, But what can they do, right? What can they do about it? When that's their situation, and they don't have the friends, and they don't have the family in these moments when they need them, and they go every day knowing when I call the police, I don't know if I'm safe. Not just because it's going to take them 20 minutes to get here, but because of the color of my skin, I don't know if I'm going to be perceived the same way as someone else. So yeah, there are protests going on. There's riots. There's looting. But the spirit of what's happening is this voice calling out to say, you're not listening. You don't know what it's like to be me. And I can tell you what it's like, but so often we're so quick to dismiss it because it's not our experience, right? It's not how we were raised. It's not the story that we know. And it's scary to me to hear people chant, defund the police, right? I mean, I know people mean different things by that. Some people mean don't overfund the police, right? Fund them appropriately and figure out how to use these dollars and this money in a different way to try to meet some of these needs that are leading to the reality that we live in, where people are resorting to crime because they have no other option. They don't have an out. When they're struggling, they don't have anywhere to turn to. That is their only option. I think for many of us, we feel like if there was nothing else for us, if there's nothing else we could do, if we were powerless, we would be able to dial that number, right? And we trust that what happens as a result of that will be in our best interest. And imagine what it's like to live every day not knowing if that's true for you. It's 50-50. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. And so I'm scared, right? I'm scared knowing that it took 58 seconds for my call to be answered. It took 20 minutes for help to arrive. And it took 3 minutes for that fight to happen, that shot to be fired, and those people to disperse. And even 10 minutes later, there were still people mingling out in the parking lot, I think just trying to figure out what to do, getting in their cars and leaving. So, I don't know. Do we defund the police? To me tonight, it felt like, I sure hope not. I hope that the next time I call, for me, I hope that my call is answered in 5 seconds, right? And when I know that there's something dangerous happening and I have no control over that, right? That they're here in minutes. And there's a part of me that says, does defunding the police solve that problem? I don't know. I think there's one side that says, obviously it doesn't, because if we have more money, we have more cops, we have better systems, we have a better response time. But the other side says having more cops doesn't fix all of that, right? What fixes that is looking at the systems that have allowed it to happen, that have allowed it to exist, and to look at the ways that we're not currently addressing those problems and those questions, the ways that we're not listening, right? And so, there's all kinds of debate. What do we do politically right now? I mean, we're in a season where we're more divided than ever. And I don't know anybody right now who feels confident about the future of the next 4 years. I think lots of people are hoping to get through it, and they're hoping for the next round. That maybe someone will rise, right? Who will just tackle these issues and bring the country together. And I think we're all waiting for that spokesperson, right? That Martin Luther King Jr. figure, right? That MLK figure to rise up and say, this is what we need to do. Right? And I know that part of the problem today is that we're all talking at each other and there's not very much listening. And I find myself often playing devil's advocate to my own ideas, my own thoughts, and then also the ideas of my friends, regardless of what side they're on. Mainly because I'm trying to say, listen, you know, I'm glad you believe what you believe. I'm glad you're passionate about it. But don't let your beliefs, don't let your passion drown out the voices of the people hurting around you. And so I say all that, right? And I'm white. Like I said, I could choose tomorrow to go look at other places to live. And I could move. You know, I could. I have the ability and the privilege to do that. And that's my story. And I'm grateful for it. But the reality is that the majority of the people that live in this country, right? They see the world a different way. They don't have those options. They can't just pack up and move, you know? And I hear people chanting at these protests like, hey, if you don't like it here, leave. Leave our country. Like, you think if some people had the ability to leave, you don't think they would? If they knew, hey, I'm going to take my family and go somewhere safe and I have the means to do that, you don't think they would? Come on, like, I think we all would, right? So, I don't know. That's what happened to me tonight. And it really got me thinking about a few things. And even though these were some things that were already important to me, that I believed, you know, were right on a philosophical level, right? You know, I think I felt it in a way that was, I guess, just for me, a bit more real and impactful. And because of the conversations that are happening right now, I think it allowed me to see everything in this context of, you know, I could go because of how I feel, right? Because I don't feel safe. But most of my neighbors can't. And they won't. They'll be here tomorrow and they'll be here next year and maybe years after that. You know, and this is the life they live. So I'm going to wrap it up because I've made this video long. I've been pausing a lot. One, because I didn't really plan what I was going to say. That's something you should probably do. More people probably would have watched my whole video if I would have thought through what I was going to say ahead of time. But it was just so raw in the moment. And mostly I'm pausing because I'm trying not to get emotional, because it still feels very, very real. It still is lingering right there on the surface. My body is still reacting to that shock that this is happening just outside my window. And all of those illusions of safety fell all at once, right? So what does this mean for you? Right, as my family and friends, people I don't know. It means we've got work to do, right? We've got a lot to think about. We've got a lot to talk about. And I'm encouraging you just to care. It's so easy to sit in the safety of our homes and our communities, knowing that we have our safety nets, that we have ways out, and that the places where we might live are especially safe because we have the privilege and the opportunity to live in those places. Recognize that that's not everyone's story. And it's not because they don't want it. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're not trying. And I'll post some other resources after this to look at some of the history. I had the privilege to teach literature for the last 2 years. And my focus in that class was, I spent a lengthy amount of time on multicultural literature, right? And we explored the poetry of Langston Hughes. We read James Baldwin, right? Notes of a Native Son. We watched Native Son by Richard Wright. We read Toni Morrison's. We talked about Recitative and The Bluest Eye. And, really packed in as much as I possibly could because there's so much going on there. And it's been really fascinating to me to see how people are still talking about the poetry of Langston Hughes, even though it was written, during the Harlem Renaissance, almost 100 years ago at this point. And it's still relevant today. Like, we have made progress for sure. But how much progress have we made if the things that were at the forefront of the political conversation 100 years ago, right, if that message is still true? If we still have people in America who are saying, I'm American, I'm the darker brother, but you send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, right? I'm American, I'm your brother, but you're ashamed of me and you don't trust me, but the only thing that's different is that I'm darker. And Langston Hughes goes on to say, but I laugh, eat well, and grow strong. And he's trying to say that, look, in spite of the fact that you've sent me away, right, that you've treated me this way, you're not going to kill me, right? You're not going to kill my spirit. You're not going to kill my people. We are going to endure. And I think he wrote that, right, because he also wrote another poem, A Dream Deferred, where he's asking the question, what happens to our dreams? What happens to this thing that we really, really want, this thing we need, and we continue to pursue it and want it, and it doesn't come, right? It just continues to not come. What happens to us? Right? He talks about, does it hang on us? Like a heavy load. Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, right? And at the end, he asks, or does it explode, right? Is this? He also says, is it a sore that just festers and then runs, right? He's asking the question, what happens when this thing is something that is part of your soul and you continue to not get it. I think we can all relate to that on a level when you've been working for something, right? And you see it, and sometimes it feels in your reach, but you have no control over whether or not you get that thing, right? Whether it's a supervisor in your way who's treating you unjustly, right? You've done everything right, and still you're treated unfairly. What if that was your story all the time? Just trying to go to the grocery store. So I said I was going to wrap up. Now I'm really going to. I said that my call to action, right? Why am I telling you all this? Because I want you to care. It's so easy to sit at home where we're safe, right? Where we know we have our safety net and not think about what's happening. Or even worse, to be mad about it, to be frustrated about it. Because our lives are being inconvenienced. And they are. I think that's the point. Sometimes our lives need to be inconvenienced, right? For someone to hear that there's something going on that isn't important to me every day. But now it's affecting my life. And so it's becoming important. It's becoming part of my conversation. And I guarantee you that the more that becomes important to you, and the more that becomes part of your conversation and that you care about it, the less it's going to inconvenience you. You want the protesting to stop? Start talking about it. Start caring about it. Start supporting your friends who are going out and trying to make a difference and have those conversations, right? Share your opinions, but listen, right? Listen to the stories of other people. So that's all I got. I had a rough night. One night, right? I've been living for 34 years, and this was the first time I had to call 911. I'd really love to know the stories of each of those individuals outside of my window tonight, and know how many times have they wanted to call 911? How many times have they needed to feel safe and didn't feel like they had options? Have they ever felt that way, Have they ever felt safe? Have they ever felt like they have the support of their community? So what would it mean to America right now if, rather than spitting at each other, debating, arguing, what if we just started listening and said, hey, you don't have to riot anymore to get my attention. Like, I hear you, and this is important, and I support you. Tell me what you need. Tell me how you need to feel. Because right now, I know you don't feel like I feel, So what does a world look like in the future where you do get to feel that way? You do get that chance. You do have that opportunity. You do have the privilege. What does that world look like? and let's get there together. So thank you if you hung around and listened to me. I probably could have made this video tomorrow in like 6 minutes, but it's, I don't know how many minutes long. So thank you for listening. I hope that this does something